There comes a moment in your life when you realize that chasing things, people, and situations never leads to fulfillment. The harder you run behind what doesn't belong to you, the further it moves away. You think the world will reward your effort, your loyalty, your persistence, but the truth is, life aligns not when you chase, but when you become. When you stop chasing validation, you gain self-respect. When you stop chasing people, you gain self-worth. When you stop chasing outcomes, you gain inner peace. And when you stop chasing the life you think you should have, you finally begin to see the life that is meant for you. Chasing comes from fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being unchosen. Fear of missing out. Fear of losing an opportunity. Fear of not being enough. And every time you chase, you send a silent message to the world that you are lacking, that you need approval, that you are incomplete without something or someone. Life mirrors your energy. When you chase, life reflects scarcity. When you align, life reflects abundance. The truth is, nothing that is meant for you will ever require you to beg for it. You don't need to run behind people who don't value you. You don't need to prove your worth to those who can't see it. You don't need to fight for a place in someone's life who doesn't make space for you. You don't need to force opportunities that constantly slip through your hands. The things that are aligned with your destiny will show up with clarity, not confusion. With effort, yes, but not desperation. With commitment, yes, but not humiliation. There's a quiet power in sitting back and saying, if it's meant for me, it will stay. If it's not, it can go. That is not surrender. That is mastery. You stop chasing when you understand your value. You stop chasing when you recognize what you bring to the table. You stop chasing when you know that your presence is a gift, not something to be begged for. When you know who you are, you stop running after things that pull you away from yourself. Most of the pain in your life came from trying to force things into place. Forcing relationships that were clearly draining you. Forcing friendships that had expired long ago. Forcing opportunities that didn't fit your nature. Forcing outcomes that were not aligned with your timing. When you stop forcing, life starts flowing. When you stop running, life begins unfolding. When you stop pushing against the current, you discover the direction you're actually meant to go. You also notice something different happening when you stop chasing people. The ones who were never meant to stay slowly fade away. Their absence creates space in your life. Space for better conversations, better connections, better loyalty, better energy. You begin to realize that the right people never make you chase. They meet you where you are. They reciprocate your effort. They show consistency. They value your time. They appreciate your presence. They don't disappear when you stop running behind them. And slowly, you begin to understand that life was never asking you to chase anything. Life was asking you to become someone. Someone with standards. Someone with clarity. Someone with emotional strength. Someone who knows their worth. Someone who doesn't crumble the moment they're ignored. Someone who doesn't lose themselves trying to be chosen. Someone who doesn't sacrifice their dignity to keep what was never theirs. When you stop chasing, you start observing. You see people for who they are and not who you want them to be. You see patterns that were always there but hidden behind your desire to keep them in your life. You see intentions that reveal themselves when you stop giving too much too quickly. You see who respects you and who only uses you. You see who stays when the benefits end. When you stop chasing, your vision becomes sharp. You also notice your inner world changing. Your mind becomes calmer. Your heart becomes steadier. Your decisions become wiser. You no longer rush to respond. You no longer fear distance. You no longer panic when someone leaves. You no longer attach yourself to temporary things. You grow into a version of yourself that cannot be shaken easily. That stability attracts everything you once chased. When you stop chasing outcomes, life begins to align opportunities you didn't expect. The job you were forcing yourself to fit into doesn't feel right anymore, and suddenly a better opportunity finds you. The person you were begging for attention fades away, and someone who genuinely values you enters your life. The path you were pushing yourself down begins to feel heavy, and a new path appears, lighter, clearer, more aligned with who you are becoming. Life rewards the brave. And one of the bravest things you can ever do is walk away from what doesn't feel right. without fear of what comes next. When you stop chasing, you signal to life that you are ready for alignment instead of attachment. You stop acting from desperation and start acting from intention. You stop acting from lack and start acting from abundance. You stop acting from fear and start acting from self-respect. You also begin to understand that timing matters. Some things are not denied. They are delayed until you're ready. Life doesn't withhold what is meant for you. It protects it until you evolve enough to handle it. When you stop chasing, you allow this timing to unfold naturally. You trust the process. You trust your journey. You trust that what belongs to you will never be kept from you. There's a moment in your growth where you realize that inner alignment creates outer alignment. When your mindset becomes disciplined, your circle becomes healthier. When your standards rise, your relationships improve. When your energy strengthens, your opportunities grow. When you know your worth, your life upgrades. The world bends for people who refuse to chase and choose instead to stand in their value. In the end, you discover a simple, life-changing truth. Chasing is what you do when you don't know who you are. Alignment is what happens when you finally remember. When you stop chasing love, you attract respect. When you stop chasing validation, you find confidence. When you stop chasing attention, you gain peace. When you stop chasing outcomes, you gain clarity. And when you stop chasing people, the right ones naturally find you. This is the moment life begins to align quietly, beautifully, powerfully, because you're no longer running away from yourself. You are walking toward the person you were always meant to become. When you stop chasing, something unexpected happens inside you. The fear that once controlled you begins to disappear. You stop worrying about who stays and who leaves. You stop overthinking every message, every silence, every delay. You stop trying to impress people who don't even value themselves. Instead of running behind everything outside you, you start coming home to yourself. You discover a calmness you never knew you had. A calmness that says, I don't need to force anything. What is mine will find me. As you move deeper into this awareness, you begin to see how much energy you wasted on things that were never meant for you. You remember the nights you stayed awake worrying about people who slept peacefully. You remember the times you begged for clarity from people who couldn't even give honesty. You remember the moments you lowered your standards just to feel accepted. And then you realize something powerful. Nothing you lost was a loss. Everything that walked away was making space for something better. You also begin to notice that. Reveal their true intentions. The ones who never cared simply fade away. The ones who were using you disappear instantly. The ones who valued only your benefits remain silent. And the ones who truly cared step closer without you having to ask. That's the beauty of stepping back. It exposes the truth effortlessly. You don't need confrontation. You don't need explanations. Distance itself becomes the test, and silence becomes the answer. And as you grow into yourself, you start to understand that love doesn't require chasing. Real love stays. Real love shows up. Real love invests. Real love communicates. Real love chooses you without hesitation. What you chased in your past were not relationships. They were attachments rooted in insecurity. What you are attracting now is alignment rooted in self-worth. When you stop running after love, love starts walking toward you. The same happens with opportunities. The moment you stop chasing everything out of desperation, you start seeing doors that were always there but hidden behind your anxiety. You realize that opportunities flow when you operate from clarity instead of chaos, intention instead of fear, confidence instead of neediness. Life opens up when you stop telling yourself that everything must happen right now. You understand that success isn't rushed, it's revealed. And what is meant for you won't feel like a battle, it will feel like a natural progression. When you stop chasing, you begin to trust yourself. You trust your decisions. You trust your timing. You trust your ability to rebuild. You trust the lessons that shaped you. You trust the silence that protects you. And you trust the path that life is carving for you. This trust gives you a confidence that no amount of chasing could ever give. Because chasing comes from doubt, but alignment comes from faith. And slowly you begin to feel something new, a quiet authority growing inside you. You stop accepting half-effort. You stop tolerating dishonesty. You stop allowing chaos into your peace. You stop explaining your worth to those who are blind to it. You stop shrinking your personality to fit into spaces that were never made for you. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. You stop entertaining connections that drain your spirit. You stop defending your boundaries to people who want to cross them. This shift changes your entire life. Suddenly your circle becomes smaller but stronger. Your conversations become deeper but fewer. Your goals become clearer and more personal. Your time becomes precious and protected. Your standards rise, and so does your energy. You become magnetic, not because you try to attract, but because you stop chasing. People feel your confidence. They feel your clarity. They feel your strength. They feel your boundaries. They feel your self-respect, and they respond to it. You also begin to see that many things you once chased were never about desire. They were about lack. You chased acceptance because you lacked self-love. You chased attention because you lacked validation. You chased temporary people because you lacked connection with yourself. You chased outcomes because you lacked trust in your own ability. But once you begin healing, once you begin growing, once you begin seeing your value clearly, those old desires fade. You outgrow the version of yourself that was built on scarcity. You upgrade into the version built on worth. Life has a strange way of giving you everything you need once you stop needing everything. When you stop chasing love, you attract better people. When you stop chasing validation, you find your purpose. When you stop chasing timelines, you discover your real pace. When you stop chasing results, you master the process. When you stop chasing what is leaving, you notice what is waiting. There comes a time when you suddenly understand that letting go is not losing, it's aligning. It's making space for the right people, the right opportunities, the right timing, the right energy, the right life. When you stop chasing, you start receiving. Not immediately, not always visibly, but gradually in ways you never expected. And one day, without warning, you wake up and realize that the life you once begged for is slowly becoming the life that naturally surrounds you. The peace you once prayed for is now inside you. The stability you once chased is now your foundation. The love you once forced is now effortless. The opportunities you once feared losing are now coming toward you. Not because you chased them, but because you became someone who attracts them. In the end, you realize something profound. You were never meant to run behind life. You were meant to walk with it, confidently, quietly, and powerfully. When you stop chasing, you start understanding something crucial that you ignored for years. What you chase becomes your master. The more you run behind someone, the more power you give them. The more you chase validation, the more control you hand over to other people's opinions. The more you chase approval, the more you tie your worth to someone else's mood. And the more you chase outcomes, the more you forget that growth is a process, not a race. Letting go isn't weakness, it's reclaiming your power. You start noticing how much calmer your life becomes when you stop trying to force a connection with people who aren't meant for your future. You stop texting first every time. You stop checking who watched your stories. You stop caring who sits with you at the table. The moment you stop proving your worth, the right people start recognizing it. And the wrong people naturally fall away because they no longer benefit from your effort. This isn't loss, this is purification. There is a point in your life where you realize that chasing makes you blind. You overlook red flags. You ignore one-sided effort. You justify disrespect. You tolerate behaviors you would never accept from yourself. Chasing makes you shrink. Waiting makes you insecure. Forcing makes you tired. But alignment makes you powerful. Alignment makes you peaceful. Alignment makes you whole. And alignment makes you attract what you once begged for. You also begin to realize that when you chase something, you're trying to control it. You're trying to control outcomes, timelines, people, opportunities, emotions. But life was never meant to be controlled, only navigated. When you surrender control, you don't lose direction, you gain vision. You begin to see that some things fall apart, not to punish you, but to push you. Some people leave not to hurt you, but to free you. Some doors close not to reject you, but to redirect you. Life always makes sense in retrospect, never in the moment. You start to develop a new kind of patience. Not the patience of waiting, but the patience of trusting. Trusting that what is meant for you is making its way. Trusting that your effort is planting seeds that will grow when the season is right. Trusting that your worth does not decrease when someone fails to see it. Trusting that rejection is protection. Trusting that every ending carries a beginning. Trusting that life unfolds in ways beyond your imagination when you stop interfering. As you evolve, you begin to notice your energy becoming your filter. You no longer entertain conversations that drain you. You no longer chase after friendships that feel unbalanced. You no longer crave presence that feels inconsistent. You no longer give attention to people who confuse you. You learn that peace is more important than popularity. Peace is more important than being right. Peace is more important than proving a point. Peace becomes your compass. When you stop chasing, people start revealing their true colors. You notice who checks on you without needing something. You notice who respects your boundaries. You notice who values your time. You notice who celebrates your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. You notice who supports you quietly without broadcasting it. You notice who treats you the same regardless of their mood. When you stop running after people, you give them the chance to show you who they really are. And most of the time, that clarity saves you from years of disappointment. You also begin to feel a deeper connection with yourself. You understand that your relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship in your life. You stop seeking love outside because you finally understand how to give it to yourself. You stop seeking validation because you begin validating your own journey. You stop seeking acceptance because you finally accept who you are becoming. The strongest version of you is born not when you chase, but when you choose yourself without guilt. You start understanding that life becomes easier when you stop running after everything and start attracting by being. You attract what matches your vibration. You attract what mirrors your mindset. You attract what aligns with your energy. You attract what feels like home to your soul. When you stop chasing, your energy shifts from desperation to confidence, and that's when life begins to align. Slowly, you begin to realize that alignment is not about everything going perfectly. It's about everything falling into place in the right way, even if the process feels uncomfortable. You may lose people, but you gain yourself. You may lose opportunities, but you gain clarity. You may lose comfort, but you gain strength. You may lose your old identity, but you gain a new purpose. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every setback becomes preparation. Every disappointment becomes redirection. And there comes a moment where you finally understand that chasing was never your path. Becoming was. Becoming disciplined. Becoming self-aware. Becoming emotionally strong. Becoming calm in chaos. Becoming clear in confusion. Becoming confident in silence. Becoming aligned with your future. Life starts aligning the moment you stop chasing and start trusting. Trusting your journey. Trusting your intuition. Trusting your growth. Trusting your timing. Trusting the lessons hidden inside the struggles. Trusting that life is not happening to you. It's happening for you. I want to leave you with the truth that will transform your life. The things that are meant for you will never demand that you lose yourself. The people meant for you will never make you feel replaceable. The opportunities meant for you will never require you to beg. The life meant for you will never feel forced. The moment you stop chasing what doesn't feel right, you make space for everything that is. And that is the moment life begins to align, quietly, beautifully, and powerfully, in your favor. When you stop chasing, life teaches you another profound truth. Nothing real will ever run from you. Real people won't disappear when you pause texting. Real opportunities won't vanish when you stop begging for them. Real love won't fade when you stop forcing connection. Real friendships won't crumble when you stop carrying the entire relationship. What leaves when you stop chasing was never meant to stay. What stays without being chased is worth keeping. You begin to understand that the world opens up for those who know their value. When you carry yourself with confidence, people treat you differently. When you walk away from disrespect, people respect you more. When you say no without fear, people learn not to cross your boundaries. When you stop seeking attention, you gain presence. When you stop running behind people, they start turning around to see where you went. There is power in showing the world that you are enough on your own. You also notice how much clarity comes when you're no longer distracted by chasing. Clarity about your goals, your relationships, your habits, your priorities. You stop wasting time on people who confuse you. You stop investing energy in situations that go nowhere. You stop pretending you don't see the truth just to keep someone in your life. You stop harming your peace for temporary comfort. Clarity becomes your guiding light. And when clarity shines, everything that doesn't belong naturally fades from your life. Another surprising thing happens. You start attracting a different kind of people. People who are mature enough to communicate honestly. People who don't play games with your emotions. People who respect your boundaries. People who value your time. People who show effort without being asked. People who bring peace instead of chaos. People who walk with you, not ahead of you or behind you. These people don't enter your life when you're chasing. They enter when you grow. When you stop chasing, you develop a new kind of strength. A quiet, steady, unshakable strength. You wake up with more confidence. You move with more purpose. You speak with more intention. You begin to live with more dignity. You stop tolerating half love, half loyalty, half effort. You stop being emotionally available to everyone. You stop explaining your worth to people who don't understand it. You stop trying to prove that you are enough. You simply become enough. And as you grow into this strength, you realize something powerful. Life only gives you what you are prepared to handle. When you were insecure, you attracted uncertainty. When you were desperate, you attracted chaos. When you were confused, you attracted mixed signals. But now that you're stronger, you begin to attract stability. Now that you are wiser, you begin to attract clarity. Now that you know your worth, you begin to attract people who see it too. Life has always been responding to your energy. When your energy was chasing, life ran. Now that your energy is aligned, life walks toward you. One day, you'll look back and realize why the things you once chased never stayed. You were chasing from a place of emptiness. You were running behind things to fill a void inside. But life doesn't give its best to someone who feels empty. Life gives its best to someone who feels whole. Someone who stands tall even when standing alone. Someone who chooses themselves even when it is hard. Someone who knows their value even when the world tries to ignore it. When you stop chasing, you begin to see how much of your life was shaped by fear disguised as effort. You thought you were fighting for love, but you were fighting for attention. You thought you were pursuing opportunities, but you were running from insecurity. You thought you were chasing dreams, but you were avoiding silence. You thought holding on made you strong, but letting go is where real strength begins. You start to understand that forcing anything only creates resistance. The more you cling, the more things slip through your fingers. The more you push, the more life pushes back. But the moment you release the grip, the moment you allow life to breathe, everything starts to settle where it belongs. What was unstable falls away. What was meant to stay finally stays. What was unclear becomes obvious. What was distant begins to move closer. Letting go creates alignment. You also realize that people can feel when you are chasing them. They sense your insecurity, your fear of losing them, your desire for their approval. And instead of valuing your presence, they take advantage of it. They become comfortable giving less because you keep giving more. They become inconsistent because you tolerate inconsistency. They become careless because you reward their carelessness with more effort. But when you stop chasing, the dynamic changes. They either step up or step out, but either way, you stop suffering. When you stop chasing, your relationships change, but more importantly, you change. You stop explaining your worth. You stop begging for clarity. You stop accepting mixed signals. You stop asking for the bare minimum. You stop tolerating emotional laziness. You begin to hold yourself to a higher standard, and naturally, you expect the same from others. This shift removes many people from your life, but it also protects you from the wrong ones. Losing them is not losing. It's protecting your peace. Your confidence begins to grow in silence. You no longer need loud validation. You no longer need to be constantly reassured. You no longer panic when someone takes time to reply. You no longer feel threatened when someone leaves. because now you know that their absence cannot shake a value that comes from within you. Your self-worth becomes independent, and independent worth is unbreakable. You begin to understand that the deepest form of alignment comes from choosing yourself, even when it's painful. The moment you stop chasing is often the moment you face your own emptiness. But instead of running from it, you start filling it, not with people, not with distractions, not with noise, but with growth, with discipline, with healing, with self-awareness, with the kind of solitude that strengthens your mind instead of weakening your heart. And then something even more powerful happens. You stop expecting life to give you what you're not ready to hold. You stop rushing your timeline. You stop comparing your pace with others. You stop believing that success is proof of worth. You begin to trust that what is meant for you will arrive when you have become the person capable of receiving it. Timing becomes less about urgency and more about maturity. As you settle into this awareness, your mindset begins to shift. You stop craving attention and start craving peace. You stop chasing connection and start choosing depth. You stop chasing popularity and start valuing authenticity. You stop chasing outcomes and start mastering habits. You stop chasing shortcuts and start embracing discipline. These shifts transform your life from the inside out, quietly, gradually, and permanently. When you stop chasing, you learn the importance of emotional neutrality. You learn not to react out of anger, not to cling out of fear, not to rush out of anxiety, and not to collapse out of loneliness. You begin to stay calm even when you are hurt, patient even when you are uncertain, and grounded even when you feel pressure. This level of emotional stability turns you into someone who cannot be manipulated, controlled, or shaken easily. And one day, you wake up with a deeper realization. You didn't lose anything by stopping the chase. You gained everything. You gained dignity. You gained peace. You gained strength. You gained clarity. You gained authenticity. You gained standards. You gained emotional maturity. You gained a self-respect so strong that it refuses to negotiate with anything that threatens your inner world. Life begins to reward you differently when you operate from this place. Not because you became lucky, but because you became aligned. Opportunities begin to choose you. People begin to value you. Love begins to respect you. Relationships begin to strengthen. Your path begins to make sense. Your vision becomes clear. You begin to feel supported by life instead of fighting against it. Because alignment is not magic. It's the consequence of self-worth. You stop living in pursuit and start living in purpose. You stop living in fear and start living in truth. You stop living for others and start living for yourself. You stop living in chaos and start living in control. You stop forcing life and start flowing with it. And in that flow, you discover the version of yourself you always needed. The version who doesn't chase but attracts. The version who doesn't beg but builds. The version who doesn't fear loss but welcomes change. The version who doesn't cling but understands. The version who doesn't break easily but bends wisely. The version who doesn't seek love outside but radiates it from within. When you stop chasing, life doesn't stop. It finally starts moving in your favor. When you stop chasing, you begin to understand that peace isn't something you find in the outside world. Peace comes from finally deciding that you will no longer betray yourself for the sake of others. You stop bending your truth to make people comfortable. You stop hiding your feelings to keep the peace. You stop shrinking your personality just to fit into places that were never meant for you. You stop apologizing for wanting more from life. For the first time, you begin to honor yourself. You become aware of how many times you broke your own heart by chasing things that were not aligned with your soul. You remember the moments you begged for clarity from someone who kept you confused. You remember the energy you wasted trying to fix people who were committed to staying broken. You remember the pain of loving people who only loved you when it was convenient. And then you ask yourself why you accepted so little when you had so much to give. This realization becomes the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where you refuse to abandon yourself again. You begin to recognize how different life feels when you give energy only where it is respected. When you stop knocking on closed doors. When you stop trying to convince someone to treat you right. When you stop waiting for people who don't show up. When you stop trying to revive relationships that died long ago. You start to feel lighter, freer, calmer. You start to feel at home in your own silence. You start to feel in control of your emotions instead of controlled by them. You also begin to understand why life removed certain people from your path. Not because they were bad people, but because they were blocking your growth. They kept you stuck in old patterns. They kept you small. They kept you tolerating disrespect. They kept you doubting yourself. Life will always remove what harms you, even when you cling tightly to it. Some losses are actually protection. Some endings are preparation. Some departures are divine interventions. As you grow deeper into yourself, you realize that the universe responds to the version of you that you choose to be. When you operate from fear, you attract fear. When you operate from insecurity, you attract instability. When you operate from desperation, you attract confusion. But when you operate from self-worth, you attract clarity. When you operate from strength, you attract respect. When you operate from calmness, you attract direction. When you operate from alignment, you attract purpose. Slowly, your inner world becomes your anchor. You stop rushing. You stop panicking. You stop doubting your path. You stop questioning your timing. You stop overthinking what's missing. You start trusting that life unfolds exactly as it should. You start realizing that the things you once thought you lost were simply making space for something more meaningful. You start seeing rejection as redirection. You start seeing endings as beginnings. You start seeing no as protection. You start seeing silence as guidance. One of the biggest shifts that happens when you stop chasing is that you become more selective. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you finally understand what you deserve. You choose people who choose you. You invest where effort is mutual. You communicate only with those who care to understand. You give your heart only to those who reciprocate it. You surround yourself with people who add peace, not problems. You stop entertaining temporary people who show inconsistent love. You also begin to understand your emotional triggers. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop letting someone else's behavior dictate your self-worth. You stop chasing arguments that lead nowhere. You stop needing closure from those who don't deserve access to you. Closure becomes something you give yourself, not something you beg for from others. You realize that peace doesn't require explanation. It requires acceptance. Your relationship with solitude also transforms. You no longer fear being alone because you now see solitude as a space where you grow the most. It's where you understand your needs, your boundaries, your values, your dreams. It's where you learn to rely on yourself. It's where you hear your intuition clearly. It's where you recharge your spirit. Solitude becomes your sanctuary, not your punishment. When you stop chasing, life rewards you with a sense of inner authority. You move differently. You speak differently. You think differently. You choose differently. You walk away with ease. You set boundaries with confidence. You allow life to unfold with grace. You begin to treat yourself with the same love you were trying to give the wrong people. And that's when everything changes. Because when you treat yourself with respect, the world mirrors it back. When you treat yourself with care, life responds with opportunities. When you treat yourself with worth, the right people recognize it. When you stop chasing, you begin attracting what matches your energy, not what validates your wounds. And eventually, you arrive at a truth that feels like freedom. You were never chasing them. You were chasing the version of yourself you hoped they would unlock. Now that you've stopped chasing, you're finally unlocking that version on your own. Stronger, wiser, calmer, more aligned, and more powerful than ever. When you stop chasing, something even more profound awakens inside you. You begin to understand the difference between wanting something and needing something. You realize that most of the things you chased were never true needs. They were emotional cravings. Cravings for validation, for attention, for love, for acceptance, for belonging. But as you begin to value yourself more, those cravings loosen their grip. You start to feel whole, not because something or someone completed you, but because you finally returned home to yourself. You also begin to notice that life moves at a different pace when you stop forcing it. Things unfold more naturally. Conversations flow easier. Decisions feel clearer. Opportunities appear without being chased. Connections deepen without being pressured. Life starts to feel like it's working with you rather than against you. And you realize that the only thing that ever stood in the way was your own fear. Fear of losing control, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. Once those fears start to fade, a new world opens. You become more disciplined, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you respect yourself enough to follow through. You start waking up with intention. You start creating habits that nourish your growth. You start separating your emotions from your decisions. You stop letting temporary feelings destroy long-term progress. You start thinking long-term. You start investing in yourself the way you once invested in others who did not deserve it. You also become more patient. Not the kind of patience that waits anxiously, but the kind that trusts deeply. You understand that everything meant for you is on its way. Not early, not late, but exactly on time. You begin to see timing differently. You stop rushing your healing. You stop comparing your journey with others. You stop believing that you are falling behind. You realize that everything is aligning exactly the way it should, even the setbacks, especially the setbacks. You begin to see that the things that fall apart are often the things that were limiting you. The relationships that broke were holding you back. The opportunities you lost were distractions. The people who left were obstacles to your growth. The version of yourself you outgrew was too small for your future. You stop seeing loss as punishment. You start seeing it as clearing. Clearing the path, clearing the energy, clearing the space for what is right. And then something magical happens. Your standards begin to rise automatically. You stop accepting half effort. You stop tolerating inconsistency. You stop giving unreciprocated energy. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop letting people come and go as they please. You stop making excuses for someone's lack of respect. You stop allowing temporary attention to convince you of long-term potential. You start choosing yourself with the kind of certainty you once reserved for others. You also develop a kind of emotional independence that cannot be broken. You no longer rely on someone else's presence to feel worthy. You no longer rely on someone else's approval to feel confident. You no longer panic over distance. You no longer crumble over rejection. You no longer fall apart when someone disappoints you. You start to see relationships as additions to your life, not the foundation of it. When you stop chasing, you start observing. You observe how people treat you when they have no benefit. You observe how they behave when you stop giving. You observe who stays when you stop trying. You observe who respects your boundaries without being taught. You observe who remembers you when they don't need anything. These observations become answers you once wanted so badly. Answers that come not from confrontation, but from distance. Your inner peace becomes your greatest treasure. You protect it like your life depends on it, because it does. You stop welcoming chaos disguised as love. You stop letting inconsistency live rent-free in your heart. You stop giving emotional access to people who haven't earned it. You stop allowing the wrong people to influence your mood. You stop handing out your energy like it's unlimited. You become selective with your time, your words, your presence, your heart. And as this transformation continues, something even deeper happens. Your life starts to match the person you're becoming. You see progress in the areas you once struggled. You see clarity in situations that once confused you. You see growth where there was once stagnation. You see opportunities where there were once obstacles. You see people entering your life who mirror your new energy. People who bring peace, not problems. Effort, not excuses. Loyalty, not convenience. You begin to realize that life has always been trying to give you better, but you were too busy chasing less. You were wrapped in cycles that kept you blind. You were attached to people who kept you small. You were focused on things that kept you distracted. But now that you've stopped chasing, life finally has the space to bring you what is meant for you. And when the right things begin to arrive, the right love, the right opportunities, the right friendships, the right growth, the right version of yourself, you will look back and understand why nothing worked when you were chasing. Because you were not ready. Because it was not aligned. Because it was not meant for who you were. but it is meant for who you are becoming. You will understand that life didn't make you wait. Life was making you worthy. Life was shaping your character. Life was polishing your strengths. Life was teaching you discernment. Life was helping you see your worth. Life was preparing you to receive something far greater than what you used to beg for. And that is the beauty of stopping the chase. Your life does not fall apart. It falls into place.